This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples' Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO and greetings. I am Jay Winter Nightwolf, the originator and host of the American Indian Indigenous Peoples Truths, Human Family Truths, Justice for All, the most dangerous broadcast on media anywhere. I want to thank you all for being with us tonight, and I would like to give a land acknowledgement. Let's pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional stewards of these lands that we reside on, that we call Turtle Island, and especially our ancestors, descendants, and all indigenous people who live now and have lived here forever on what we call Turtle Island. This is what they call, and notice I said they, put an emphasis on they, this is what they call Thanksgiving. Native American people do not acknowledge Thanksgiving because it started out when they went up into the Hudson Bay area, and it was cold, it was snowing, and they did not land on Plymouth Rock. They shipwrecked on Plymouth Rock. And they were out in that water, cold, hungry, desperate. Somebody needed to save them. So as well, we always do. We help people that are in trouble. Biggest mistake. Good thing I wasn't alive then, because I would have left them laying on the beach after knowing what they've done since they've been here. They came across the Atlantic Ocean because they were being ran out of Europe by the crowned heads of Europe. And they had nowhere else to go, so they came this way. And tonight, my good brother, my friend for many, many years, Professor Morgan J. Peters, is on with us tonight. And Morgan and I and my special co-host, Vince Hall, we will tell you the story of what really happened. Nothing like what they've written, nothing like what they've bragged about. We'll be back in just a moment to introduce my guest for this evening. We have no news for you tonight, but we have something for you tonight that you should walk away with, something that you've never heard before. The truth about this Thanksgiving holiday. Don't go away. I'm Jay Winter Nightwolf. Talk to you in just a few minutes. Welcome back to the most dangerous show on radio. Where's Walim? Are you there, Walim? There you go. I will tell all of you this, that I don't observe this Thanksgiving holiday. To me, it's not just another day, but it's an opportunity for people to have the day off from their jobs and to spend time with their families. And I am very fortunate this year. I have my granddaughter here, and she is a retired, 100% disabled United States Marine, and she was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. Put your face over here so they can see you. It's my granddaughter, Jazz. And she has my 6-year-old great grandson. Where is he? Call him. Come here, Max. Come and say hello to everybody. Come on, hurry up. Stop playing, boy. I don't care what you don't know about. Get over here, boy. Come here. Look in the screen. See you? This is my grandson, Maximilian Christian Fleming. How you doing, Max? Okay. Thank you. You can go back and do what you're doing. Go back and get your computer.
You mean my
Your iPad. God. I also have with you my very good friend for many, many years, Professor Morgan J. Peters, University of Mass Dartmouth, and also known as Walim, the funky professor. And the reason for that is because he has a band, and it's a funk band. Walim, how are you, brother?
Doing well tonight, brother. How about yourself?
Okay, and he's also a member of the Wampanoag Nation of Massachusetts. Also, the guy up there in the top right-hand corner is my co-host, Vincent Hall. Vince, how are you? He's also a retired Army, 100% disabled.
How you doing this evening, Jay? You all right?
I'm fine now that I see the two of you, and the three of us together.
How you doing, Wale?
All right, brother. How about yourself?
I'm doing my best, thank you, sir.
Oh, good.
All right. And I think we got somebody else in the room. I think her name is Leslie Fry. Leslie, bring yourself in. Are you there, Leslie?
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Hello, Leslie.
Leslie is my executive producer of my television broadcast, Jay Winter Nightwolf Live. So how would we like to start this conversation off? I'm going to point at my brother, Walim. Tell us about this Thanksgiving lie they've been telling for years.
Okay. So now wait, when I talk to you, should I face forward or should I do this?
Yeah, this is very straight up Brady Bunch here.
I've just always wondered. The great lie of Thanksgiving. Well, what we need to do is, I guess I'll work backwards. Thanksgiving, as we know it, was created by Macy's as a marketing tool to create a countdown or to create countdown excitement to Christmas. It begins the start of the, shopping days till Christmas. It even comes down to, the parade. And I have to say, as a kid, I loved the parade. I loved the Thanksgiving parade. I loved standing out in the cold and watching the balloons. It was a lot of fun as a kid. So let me first say that. But we all know the parade, which takes you right down Broadway and ends right in front of Macy's and always ends up with Santa Claus at the end of the parade, was specifically designed to lead everybody right into Macy's. and into Santa's Wonderland and into the toy department at Macy's. That's what the Thanksgiving parade was about. And what they did was falsified events of history to create, because what we have to also look at is the American society is based on commerce. America has no culture. America itself has no real history. It's all constructed, and it's largely constructed for the sake of commerce. So when we look at that, we look at the fact that, okay, the colonists, the invaders who'd set up their encampment in Plymouth, Massachusetts, in celebration of the harvest and making it through the last winter in the seasons, as part of their celebration, were firing off muskets. And about 90 Wampanoag men, hearing the muskets, went to investigate what was the disturbance. And when they came upon the encampment, they were fed, because what the encampment thought was, well, if we feed them, they won't be hostile. The fact of the matter was, folks weren't going to be hostile. They were just wondering, what's the shooting about? What's all the noise about? So that situation, which was, they were not invited to the feast. They were actually not even necessarily welcome to the feast. But that story constantly gets misrepresented as this was a shared feast and this was a thank you from the invaders for the Wampanoags helping them survive the winter. No, no such thing. That's a completely falsified story. The first recorded, sanctioned Thanksgiving that took place in Massachusetts was actually to celebrate the slaughter of Wampanoag, Pequot, and Nipmuc people. It was to celebrate victories in Metacomet, otherwise known as King Philip's War. It was to celebrate victories in the Pequot War. It was not, and so the first Thanksgiving was actually to celebrate the actual decimation of Northeast Woodland Native people. The subsequent history of Thanksgiving, if you look it up, was sanctioned by Abraham Lincoln, the great Indian killer. Now, when I say this, let us bear in mind, if you read in history the various brags that went out during Abraham Lincoln's campaign days, one of them was that he was able to kill an Indian baby in the hands of a squaw 100 yards away with his rifle because he was such a marksman. He built most of his campaign at that point on being an Indian killer. This is when he was running in Illinois. Along with this history, let us also remember he sanctioned the largest mass hanging in U.S. history, which was a hanging of Native men, women, and children. The celebration of Thanksgiving in that regard was tied to that. Those victories, the victories of white supremacy. Following in this traditional tie, because they always tried to put it around that time of year, brings us to now Macy's and the Thanksgiving Day celebration. And why it's always positioned roughly 4 weeks away from Christmas Day. So that's our origin. But let's take it back to, it was celebrating slaughter. The first Thanksgiving was celebrating the fact that Metacomet's head was placed on a pike, and that pike spent 25 years in the middle of Plymouth's town square.
That's right.
That's what the first Thanksgiving was celebrating. It was celebrating the fact that Wampanoag and Nipmuc and Pequot and Narragansett people were captured and sold into slavery in Bermuda and in North Africa, or sold into slavery even in the UK. This is what the first Thanksgiving was a celebration of, as sanctioned by the governor of Massachusetts.
Yeah.
In fact, as depicted by the hopefully outgoing state seal, which depicts a Native man with a sword poised over his head. Many people say that this is a depiction of what happened to Metacomet, which has been the Massachusetts state seal. And to tell you how long the fight goes back, my uncle Slow Turtle started that fight, and he's been among the ancestors since the 90s.
Yeah. And I will tell you this too, Walim. This started way before they actually found their way across the Atlantic Ocean. It started in the 1450s
Yes, sir.
in the Vatican, Rome, the place that is called the head of the Catholic Church. They decided when they saw all of their white European brothers wanting to hit the waters and find other places. And when they saw them traveling and desirous of doing things that were great, the priests of the Roman Catholic Church issued a Catholic edict or an order called the Papal Bulls. And those Papal Bulls merely stated that if you European, you white people go anywhere in the world, and you have the right to go anywhere in the world. And if you find people that don't look like you, act like you, agree with you, think like you, and refuse to convert to Roman Catholicism, you have the divine right, sanctioned from the Roman Catholic Church, to either subdue them, which means enslave them, or kill them. And anything and everything that they have that you are desirous of or you want, you got the blessings of the Roman Catholic Church to take it from them. As long as you give 10% of the value of what you take back to the Roman Catholic Church. So racism started way beyond the visit of the first Europeans that invaded us.
Oh, yeah. And then, of course, there was the subsequent improvement. Because previous to being under the Vatican is what determined whether or not you were a human being. The concept of whiteness is then introduced in the early 1600s. And the concept of whiteness is introduced in the UK and introduced in Germany. And subsequently, this concept of whiteness is then supported by a false science called eugenics. You okay, big bro?
Fine, you're fine.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I have a question about this. I wanted to understand the psychology of privilege and the psychology of believing that you are better than other people. Where did that concept come from? Because I understand that everything that, our country, our place here on Turtle Island, when they came here and they claimed this land as their own land, even though there were other occupants here, understand that these people were considered to be renegades, fugitives. This was a penal colony, basically. Mm-hmm. And so was places like Australia. So my thing is, where did this concept of white is better and this is mine and I'm going to claim it despite the fact that you're here and you are inferior to me as a white person, where did this come from?
It's interesting because when you look at history, it's a spiraling effect. Because what we have to do is let's wind back. And if we wind back to that period, the people that we now see as white, most of whom were not considered white at that point.
That's right.
If you were white, you were from Germany or from England. And by convenient extension, it was then given to people from Scotland. But initially, unless you could trace your line back to the Saxons or the Anglo-Saxons, you were not white. It was a Germanic concept. Now, part of this concept, we also have to look at the rise of the Prussian Empire, which ironically only happened because of Moorish involvement.
Yeah.
But the thing is, when we first look at the rise of the Ottoman Empire, This is and when we also combine this with other theories where they talk about the concept of greed relates to the concept of resources, and the further north you were, the fewer resources you had. Therefore, the more likely you were going to be greedy. And of course, this is when we look at developments of cultures and we look at developments of societies, this stands to be true. Where do we see the initial greatest advancements happening? It's in our southern regions. When we look at Asia, we look at South Asia, we look at the African continent, we look at the subsequently constructed Middle East. These were lands of plenty. So therefore, the concept of greed, the concept of conquest was not to the same extent as, say, somebody who only has a planting season, perhaps that runs from April to, so that is one of the theories behind it. And of course, when we then look at, when we go back in history and look at who were the people who were raiding and pillaging, first we think of Vikings, we think of all the people who are coming from that Ottoman Prussian region. When we think about when we read some of the early writings that are translated coming from North Africa, and when we're reading these writings and they're talking about these hairy beasts that look like human beings and could barely walk on two legs, etc., that seem to be roaming the wilderness and were so dangerous and so deadly, and how they had to fight them off and they were savage, we begin to see, wait a minute, they were up in Europe. And they're encountering these people that they were talking about. They're in France. They're in Germany. So you realize these savages that are being described in these writings are the same people we're dealing with now.
So just I want to clarify for a lot of people, and people don't want to use the concept of being white and that being better. Understand too that when people came here to the U.S. Before the 1600s, people were classified by financial means. It was have and have nots. So anybody coming here from other countries like Germany and such, they were sold into servitude, and they were working hand in hand with free blacks, people coming that were free, willing people that came from Africa, that came here just for an opportunity, people who came from Canada that were black. Everybody worked together. It was either you had money or you did not have money. This is why there was such an intermingling mixture of intersectionality between European, Native American, and black at that time. The concept of them being white being the right and white being better came in the 1700s, and then of course subsequently during the transatlantic slave trade. Mm-hmm. But understand that people that came from Ireland, people who came from Italy, they were considered less than and also in the same classification as black people until they started changing that terminology. So when these people came here, that's what they were considered. Often you would see people that were Irish working alongside people who were black, free people of color, or people who were enslaved. They were either indentured Irish people or whatever. So there's a lot of intermingling of that. A lot of us have Irish heritage based on that intersectionality. Mm-hmm. So people have to understand that it started becoming a concept even in our senses. And you can see that that we suffered a genocide in our senses, basically, because white is the one thing that stayed the same throughout the census from the 1600. It did not change or deviate. Anybody that was of color, mulatto, mestizo, anything like that, that started changing to eventually black. And then it became an issue of skin color. If you look black, you were then identified as black.
Yeah, this is true. Now, it's funny you bring up the census because the designation of who was white every decade shifts. In 1990, North Africans were designated white.
And so were Asians, by the way.
Yes.
So were Asians.
In 1990. Well, no, only certain parts of Asia.
Certain parts. Southeast Asia, no.
No, but like if you were from Japan, yes. You could consider yourself white. By the year 2000, that was when they introduced such a concept of white Hispanic. Now,
we could go into a whole nother discussion on that.
But what happens is every time the pool of what were white people shrinks, what they do is they then just expand the definition. Because it's an interesting game that they play. Because exactly like you said, there's a wonderful book out called "How the Irish Became White."
Yeah.
And I was listening to a lecture the other day when they said the only people who actually benefited from the civil rights movement were Jews, because they won whiteness with their participation. And, that floored me for a second, but then I thought about it and was like, actually, that was a high-point call.
Yeah, point on. And, something else that we need to consider, too, is there's never been anybody on the face of the earth that have come to Turtle Island or the United States that has been discriminated against. And a prime example of that, the Chinese Exclusion Act. And next week, we're going to have a guest on here. Her name is Moy Ing. She's Chinese, but she's also one of the greatest female jazz singers I've heard since Nancy Wilson, Nina Simone, and Sarah Vaughan. I'm now going to really date myself. Ella Fitzgerald and Dakota Staten. She's going to be a guest on this broadcast next week. And I asked her when I've had the opportunity to sit and talk with her in person. I asked her, I said, "You're very successful in what you're doing." She said, "Yes, I am." She says, "I'm very blessed." I said, "But I've never heard a voice like this before coming out of somebody that looked like you." She said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, do you know who my hero has always been?" I said, "No." She said, "Aretha Franklin." I said, "Wow, I can hear it." So she's going to be guest here. And I asked her, I said, "Moy, would you be embarrassed or would you feel as though you couldn't talk about the Chinese Exclusion Act?" She said, "Jay, I've been wanting to talk about that for years. Nobody ever asked me about that." And then I saw a tear drop from her eye. She said, "That's my family story." She said, "Back then in the 1800s, our families had businesses and we were living good. We were trying to make our way. But as it happens, they always concentrate on taking from us." She said, just like they did the Japanese. They placed them in these internment camps. Those people had businesses and they were thriving Americans. But this white American government is guilty of racism from the inception of these United States, even up to today. Look at the brother that they murdered in Florida, Ahmaud Arbery. Now they're trying to figure out, well, we don't know if it was intentional or not. How in the world can it not be intentional? But a black man that lives in that community is walking down the street and three of these ignorant, I'm going to be nice tonight.
Individuals.
Yeah, individuals pull their guns out and shoot and kill the man only because he was black running through the neighborhood. This is happening all the time. And until all of us, our Native brothers and sisters, our Black brothers and sisters, our Asian brothers and sisters, and our good white brothers and sisters, until we wake up and start talking to each other instead of at each other and coming up with solutions beyond the court system. The court system is rigged. And I know they want to come after me before that. But I've got case on top of case on top of case where the courts are rigged. If you're not white, or if you don't have any money in being white, you don't stand a chance you know, you have a better chance of being a snowball in hell than what you have here in the United States of America.
I wanted to actually bring up Curtis's comment here. Keep in mind, we have to also get out of the narrative of thinking Europe means white, Africa means black, because a lot of these Irish people were actually melanated. Also, a lot of Scottish lines were also melanated, and a lot of them were royalty. And this is true. These people, a lot of these people were indigenous to those places. Believe it or not, they were indigenous. And of course, the British came over and took them. This is why there's been this conflict between the Irish and the British for so long. Similar to the struggle of what we are dealing with as indigenous people here of Turtle Island, the Irish and the Scottish had to succumb to the British royalty, even though they were of indigenous people of that land. And previously, before that, they were people that were interacted with the Moors. So you do have Irish who are dark complected, dark hair, because of the Moorish intersection. So,
and the Moors used to own them as slaves, also.
Yes, exactly.
Funny story to connect, by the way. When I was in high school, we had to do the Mendel chart.
Yeah.
With the recessive genetics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did my Mendel chart on where red hair comes from. And who ended up in the science department chair's office?
Mm-hmm. But you know, Europe had their own indigenous people. They were called the Sami people.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
They were the Indians of Europe.
Yes.
Well, you want to talk about erasure? Pixies, fairies.
Yes.
Were actual tribal
beings. Yes.
Yes. We're all actual tribal beings of the lands before they were invaded by the Anglo-Saxons.
Yep.
And instead they now get erased as it's
they
like
were imaginary.
They were fantasy beings. Elves, they really exist. You find out all of these people, all of these beings really existed. These were the little people. And and it's funny because when they describe them, not to play anybody out there, but I'm like, sure y'all weren't talking about Apaches, but
no.
Listen, there's a wonderful book. These beings also existed in Africa, and there's a wonderful book that you can read called "Of the Water and the Spirit," which talks about a man whose grandfather was a medicine man of a tribe. He was in line to inherit that, and he was captured and taken to a Jesuit school. And he walked all the way from a Jesuit school in a whole different city and country, not country, but different area that he was, to put on the mantle of being the medicine man of his tribe. And it is a fascinating story where you can learn about these beings.
Okay. The Cherokee people, part of my heritage, the little people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there were some little people, and we honored them. They were even wisdom keepers and medicine people.
Would you, if I may, Jay? But that's the same thing. If you remember when the European courts with the kings, they always had a dwarf. That was them poking fun at the African, because in masonry you have Bes, the small deity. And then these were what they called the Nig, which were the small people in the Nile Valley, which were the pygmies, who were very, very intelligent. So the Europeans took fun at poking fun at us, trying to belittle our intelligence. Because we were so intelligent, they wanted to make us the joke so that people wouldn't realize that the pygmies in Africa were actually the very most intelligent people. Now, if you look at nature and if you see someone small, why would they be so small? Because of gravity, because of the sun, because of science, physics. I won't get into all of that. Don't believe me, look it up. It's a lot that go into that. And we can, like Leslie said, we can be on this all night. And I like the way Wileen touched on it. When you look at masonry, and when you look at the Irish,
right.
The Moors came over here. That's why you see a lot of blackamoors on the Irish on their crest. And you wonder why the Irish was slap happy with those billy clubs in the 30s and the 40s with blacks when they became police officers. They recognized their history as being owned as slaves by the Moroccans.
Well, let me tell you something else about the Irish. When I was a little boy,
and I'm not beating up on the Irish. I respect
I know. Chill out, everybody. When I was a little boy, my grandfather, who was the Cherokee Shoshone man, owned the last set of working stables in Washington, D.C. And he would deliver in the wintertime ice and coal and wood on a wagon with a horse in front of it. In the summertime, it was ice, of course, because people didn't have refrigerators, they had ice boxes. And he would deliver in the summertime butter, eggs, and some of the bread that my grandmother baked. And one of his stops every day was to a place on Florida Avenue called Hagen Plumbing Supply. And we went there one day. I'm sitting up on the wagon. I must have been about 5 years old. And Mrs. Hagen comes out. She says, "Paul, how you doing?" He says, "I'm fine. I'm delivering stuff to you now." He says, "Okay, but who's this little boy?" He said, "Oh, that's my grandson." "That's your grandson?" "Yeah." And she looked at me. She said, "What's your name?" I said, "Jay." She says, "Would you like something to eat?" "Been riding all morning with Grandpa." "Yeah, I do." I said, "Yes." She reached up and pulled me off the wagon and took me into their home, which was also part of their business, and fed me. She says, I got a little grandson that you need to meet." I said, "Okay." His name was Peter J. Hagen. So I said, "Okay." And Petey and I became good friends. I mean, little boys running through Hagen Plumbing Supply. And I noticed up against the wall behind a bookcase were these signs. So I said, "Petey, what's that?" He said, "I don't know. Let's pull them out." Those were original signs that they had in New York City and other places on the East Coast that said, "Help wanted, Irish need not apply." So that goes back to what I was saying, that not just about, but everybody that ever came to the United States at some point or another was discriminated against. So what bothers me is how some of our Black brothers and sisters, they want everybody to think that they were the only ones that were discriminated against. Not true. The Chinese, the Japanese, the Irish, the Italian. But I will tell you this: if you go to Italy or Sicily and you tell one of those guys over there, "Oh, so you're white," you know what he'll tell you? "I'm not white. I am Northern African." So there's been a big joke that's been played on all of humanity. And until we recognize this and come together and start talking about it and finding solutions other than the damn courts, we'll never get anywhere. And as far as I'm concerned, the courts are crooked. Yeah, go ahead, sweetie.
We want to kind of move on just a little bit, but I wanted to also recognize Red Road East. He talked about the book of Water and the Spirit. It is by Malign Patrice Sommet. Thank you so much for listening to that. But it's an awesome book if you want to read it. I think it is extremely eye-opening if you need to read it. Hello, Kwame's son Horace. He's talking about the Chinese coming here to America in 1421. Yes, we have found new evidence of this. The Chinese were also seafaring people who thinks that only Italians named Columbus could get in a ship and come here.
Oh, they came here before Columbus was even a thought.
Yes. So the Chinese actually here, there's actual evidence shown of them, of Chinese symbols written in rocks in some indigenous areas where they came there to visit. And it's important to note that when people were coming here 50,000 years ago, and as Elder has mentioned before, the Phoenicians, the Mali, these people never came here to conquer this land. It was a fact-finding mission and a trade mission. So understand that these people never came here to conquer. They left something and they took something, but it was not slaves. It was not lives. It wasn't anything like that. It was an exchange of ideas, information, items.
And international trade.
and international trade. Exactly.
You know, you were saying something earlier, and I think a lot of people don't realize it. You were talking
About how it becomes white, or how they decide to take what they want. But a lot of people don't realize, if you look at the English, like you were mentioning earlier, the Anglo-Saxons, they're really not English. Just by the
No.
name, Angles. It's a Germanic tribe.
They're
The issue in the
German.
English language just means pertaining to. So you're looking at a Germanic tribe that migrated to another place, but am I not who my father is? So you're claiming to be European, well, not just European, let me rephrase that. You're claiming to be English. You're accurate in your, here within the lie lies the truth. You're not necessarily an English person. You're a Germanic tribe that migrated. So you wouldn't be considered an English person. You would be considered a person of the tribe of Angles, which takes you back to Germany, which also gives you a certain relevance to the Greeks in your national origin story of mythology. But they have similar mythological stories. And then when you look at the Greeks, they ain't do nothing but take the Sumerian culture and put it and flip it and give you your Bible back to you.
That's right.
From a white perspective. And that's not a racial statement. I'm just saying they took someone else's culture and claimed it as their own, and then gave it back to you as your own story, but changed your complexion.
And then I'm just going to say, and then we want to look at it as the mothership connection. Let's look at the royal family.
Ooh.
Let us look at the fact that once Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles pass, Prince Charles's son is going to be the first actually English monarch to sit on the throne, because up until now they've all been German. And to make the tie together even bigger, Elizabeth's husband is Greek. Like, as you just mentioned, that whole, so it's like all, and now, now to throw some extra shade in the water, let's talk about Queen Elizabeth's great grandmother.
Yep. And if you look back in some of the pictures of Queen Elizabeth when she first sat on the monarch of England before all the plastic surgery, she had this big wide nose. You know where that came from, though? Yeah, no.
Couldn't clot.
Yeah.
They couldn't clot. So they had to mix with us because they couldn't clot. Bottom line, it was genetics.
Well,
they couldn't stop the bleeding.
Let's also talk about the fact that intersectionality between blacks and people of color and what we call the English monarchy runs very deep. This even extends to Austria. It extends to some of the Germanic tribes. They just basically whitewashed it out. And somebody made a comment about some Europeans are black, so we just can't blame Caucasians for our problems. And you're absolutely right, Divine Order of the Red Wolf. We're not blaming all Caucasians, but we're blaming a colonistic mindset. And let's make sure that that's what we're clarifying here. And that's something that did not exist prior to colonizers coming here.
Anybody ever thought about Charlemagne?
Hannibal.
Yeah.
And the Catholics only got theirs because of money.
That's right.
When you think about it, because when they went to Emperor Constantine, the only reason they became the leading religious organization was because they had more money in the pot.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. There was another religious group in competition with the Catholics, but the Catholics had more money, and Constantine was like, "I'm with it."
But why did the Catholics have more money?
Offer.
Why did the Catholics have more money? Let's discuss the fact that the Catholics rewrote the Bible in order to appease the pagans. Everything that we have in our Bible today and some of the traditions that are common within the Catholic Church right now are of paganistic background.
Yes.
This is why Martin Luther he broke off from the Catholic Church because the pagans had the money, so they had to figure out of a way to bring the pagans into the church. So what they did is they made their nuns their virgins of the temple. They made their priests the eunuchs of the temple.
Egypt and the Greeks.
It has never been biblically correct, except for the fact that Paul might have been someone who did not marry, but the Bible encourages marriage. And so therefore you're seeing something that is not biblically truth, but it's been something that has been a common thread through the Catholic Church, which primarily did not biblically exist. I'm not knocking anything of the Catholics, but I just want you all to understand that that's the truth.
Yeah. May I interject something here? I want you all to think about what we're talking about tonight. You've been exposed to more truth in this less than an hour on this television show than you've probably been exposed to your whole life.
Oh, and Jay, if I may, since we are talking about Thanksgiving, if you'll give me a moment, there's a plaque in Plymouth. It's called the National Day of Mourning. If you'll allow me a moment to read it in acknowledgement of our ancestors, the Native Americans, the indigenous people, I would like to read this plaque, if you allow me.
Go right ahead.
It's called the National Day of Mourning. Since 1970, Native Americans have gathered at noon on Coles Hill in Plymouth to commemorate a National Day of Mourning on the U.S. Thanksgiving holiday. Many Native Americans do not celebrate the arrival of the Pilgrims and other European settlers. To them, Thanksgiving Day is a reminder of the genocide of millions of their people, the theft of their land, and the relentless assault on their culture. Participants in National Day of Mourning honor Native ancestors and the struggles of Native peoples to survive today. It is a day of remembrance and spiritual connection, as well as a protest of the racism and oppression which Native Americans continue to experience. This plaque was erected by the town of Plymouth on behalf of the United American Indians of New England.
Okay, let me add something to that. You know, they say, well, did Indians ever celebrate Thanksgiving? No. But if you go to the Mohawks, the Oneidas, you go to the Six Nations in New York, they have always taught their children that when they come to class, you say the Thanksgiving prayer. And that prayer is not about the turkey or the dressing or the cranberries. It's about thanking the Creator for everything that we have that was given to us by the Creator. So yes, we had Thanksgiving long before they even got lost at sea and wandered over here and started all this mess. Wampanoag, I see you shaking your head. Come on, and say something. Say it.
It becomes, what I see is sort of like it's fashionable now to abandon holiday. And it's very much along the lines of what you said at the beginning of the broadcast. Anything that brings families together, anything that brings the generations all together in one room, at one table, to sit and have conversation, to sit and enjoy each other's company, is a good thing. When it becomes a problem is when you listen to the people sit and talk about the Pilgrims surviving their winter. And, you know, that's when you want to throw the meal on the floor and hit somebody. But, you know, and you know, and nothing like being in a black or brown person's home who's going to do that. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I ask this a question? What are we going to be doing going forward to make sure that the truth is told in schools? We all grew up in schools, some of us who had not connected with our indigeneity, learning this lie. And that lie is still perpetuated today in schools.
Can I say it as an educator?
Yes.
We have to start abandoning the schools. You know, the problem is we can't go into the number one tool of colonization and expect them to then do us correctly.
Ain't gonna
The public school system, compulsory education did not come about for the betterment of people. Compulsory education came about because people needed to read, write, and do basic math to run the machinery of industry. You know, compulsory education goes hand in hand with the Industrial Revolution. Anytime there has been an advancement in education, it has not been to serve us. The advancement in education have been to make us serviceable. This is why public schools are the training ground for us to, well, initially, the public schools were the training ground for us to work in the factory or in the cubicle. Now, what they've done is the public school is now the training ground to go to prison or to go in the military or to go work in the factory. You know, this is something that I point out to my students constantly. When the ones who went to public school all sat in rows, they learned to respond to bells. They had, you know, the school day is aligned with the work day, the lunchtime, and all that. And then I talk to my kids who go to the private schools, who go to the, you know, the academies, etc. Their classroom sizes were much smaller. They sat in a circle. Why? They're being prepared to sit at the boardroom table.
absolutely.
And we're being taught to sit in the row. So looking at that, the problem is the community involvement in our education was, you know, the community involvement in our education and development was much more than just the time we spent in school. So we need to somehow revisit and reinvent, how do we augment that possibility? How do those of us who have those resources and can teach our children, how do we then spread it out to teach the children whose parents might not be able to do that? And how do we get out of, you know, and how do we get out of the colonialist system? In February, out here on the Cape, I do a presentation called Curating Your Child's Education. And it's totally about, you know, 150 years of best practices. And it's totally about how do you navigate a racist system designed for you to fail? So moving forward, at least my answer to the thing of moving forward is we need to stop worrying about the public schools. Let the public schools do what they do, give us the basics. But in order for our actual development and advancement, that's not going to happen. You know,
No.
the same way that the public schools are not going to teach us how to start businesses. They, you know,
Yeah.
teach us how to get a job, but it's not going to teach us how to start a business. It's not going to teach us how to, you know, so therefore there's so many deficiencies in terms of how the public school, that's definitely not one that they're going to even try to put on the plate properly.
One of the things that we need to consider is we need to consider starting our own schools.
Exactly.
Okay. And there's been so much success with us starting our own schools.
Mm-hmm.
We can make things happen. We can decolonize our children's minds and then give them what they really need to be successful in life. Not just to serve some master that you work 9 to 5 for. I just saw a statement on from Frank King. Can you pull that one back up for me? In order to decolonize, you must first apostatize and return to your original tribal root.
I agree.
Absolutely, Frank. Love you, bro.
Facts.
Frank is a Lakota from South Dakota.
Divine Order of the Red Wolf, you had a question for Elder Nightwolf. If you want to put it in the chat, go ahead and I'll pull it up.
You see, I like what Wampanoag was saying about the education. I had someone pose a question to me in a lodge once. And he said, imagine if, when we went to Sunday school as children, instead of teaching us an interpretation of the scriptures, what if they taught us Hebrew? We would not need an interpretation.
Well, that's a great concept. As someone who has studied theology, we did not study the Bible per se. It was used as a reference, but we studied the Greek, the Hebrew, and the Aramaic.
There you go.
Because those language are very rich. What we have, the English language is very limited. It only is what it is. But if you speak Hebrew, if you speak Greek or whatever, it has a meaning, which means that God and the concept of God is much more than the pages that are written in that Bible. And let's talk about the fact that the Bible that we know as the King James Bible is not the full Bible.
No.
Your best
No.
way to study is to learn the Aramaic, the Greek, read the Torah, and yes, read the Quran. This is where you get a better concept of who God is, a
Yes.
well-rounded concept of who God is.
Yes.
But the Bible per se, don't take it for face value because it is not the correct Bible.
And then you got the Gutenberg,
Well,
the
yeah,
oldest, and then you got well, anyway.
we could
That's-
get into
that's-
that. We could definitely
It's
get into
cool.
that, but understand we have to understand the concept of King James and who created that Bible that we are reading, and what he wrote in that Bible,
And what he didn't
and
let
what
in.
and what he didn't
I-
let in, and
I
what
have-
he didn't let in.
I have a pop quiz for you.
Let's hear it.
What language was the first King James Bible in the colonies published in?
In the colonies. That's a good question.
German.
Nope.
Would it Old English, Latin?
Nope.
Oh man.
What was it written in? I'm
First
curious.
Colony Bible.
The first Bible to be printed in the colonies was written in Wampanoag.
Oh wow!
Printing press was recently discovered at Harvard because remember, the present day HUNAP program, Harvard University Native American program, grew out of the Indian school, which was part of the seminary that later became Harvard University. And of course, Harvard was instrumental in the conversion
That was my that was gonna be my question.
of the Wampanoag, the quote unquote praying Indians.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bible was phonetically written in Wampanoag, and they recently found the printing press.
Now would that have something to do with the Jesuits?
No, Jesuits were
Nope.
different. Jesuits are a different
They
story.
did their own little thing.
Now with the Jesuits, you want to talk about the mass slaughters that took place in the late 1600s, and along with the laws that outlawed Indians from entering the city of Boston. The mercenaries who did most of the slaughtering were Jesuits. It is not by accident that Boston College is located in Chestnut Hill.
Okay. We've run out of time, and
We could definitely stay on this mountain for a very long time,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well,
and I think we need to continue it at some point.
oh, absolutely. You got so many people that have written in and want to know this and want to know that, and yes, they should.
Oh, real quick on what
Cut me
Wampanoag was
off
saying
again.
earlier.
How do you
It
live?
was 1637. 700 Pequot were massacred, and the governor was John Winthrop. I just wanted to mention that. His name was John Winthrop. He was the one that
another
encouraged all of this nonsense.
another white racist. Okay. I would like to also invite everybody this Sunday to my new radio, broadcast on Radio 1 out of Washington, D.C. If you live in the Washington metropolitan area, you can go to 1450 AM or 95.9 FM. If you want to catch the show on the internet live for 2 hours, just go to DC News. No, it's WOLDCnews.com from 6 o'clock East Coast time in Sunday evening until 8 o'clock.
And if anybody's wondering why we all keep clearing our throat, that's because the ancient ones keep stepping in.
Mm-hmm.
Deep.
Yep. So I want to thank all three of you for being here, especially you, Leslie. I love her. That's my producer.
I love y'all too.
I love you, Leslie.
And she can hang with the heavyweights, especially with the boys.
Oh man, she knocked them out.
I want to thank you, Vince, for being my co-host and
My honor.
my dear friend and brother. And of course, what can I say about Walim?
Oh wait, let me do it right.
Oh, hold up. Don't you have something coming up, Wally? Music?
We'll have an album that came out.
No,
Oh, let's-
about the Nammies.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
your son.
so I'm the Groovalados are currently nominees. We're preliminary nominees in the Native American Music Award for Best Blues Recording.
Yes. Congratulations. All right.
Congratulations.
For our EP called A Taste of Things. But then to completely outdo us, the ZYG 808, my 18-year-old, who also happens to be the drummer for the Groovalados, he's nominated as Best Debut Artist. And his music video, Gymnastics, is a nominee for Best Short Form Music Video in the Native American Music Awards.
All right.
So if we have any NAMA members watching right now, the Groovalados, Best Blues, ZYG 808, Debut Artists, put us in that top 5.
Somebody, Gary Lewis wants to know how he can follow you and your work.
Oh, okay, Brother Gary. By all means, if you check me out on thefunkyprofessor.com, DAPHEEPROFESSOR.com, that's my website. If you go on Instagram, I'm simply at MWALIM, MWALIM. If you're a TikTok person, you can find me at MWALIM_thefunkyprof.
All right.
All right. You hooked up. That's what I would say.
Oh, and I've been having fun lighting people up on TikTok, and I now have almost 10,000 followers. So,
Oh,
And
congratulations.
I am one of those followers. I love your TikToks.
oh, thank you.
I'm gonna join in. I'm be honest with you. I haven't got on Instagram yet because I'm not too familiar with all of that stuff. But you will be one of the first people I follow.
All right.
Once I get on it.
And I post the more serious stuff on mine, but if you want to have a good laugh, you then go on the Groovalados TikTok.
Oh man, I like both ends of it.
Because we now have a big controversy on the Groovalados TikTok because I made fun of the fact that when you went in Walmart, the meat counters were empty and the seasoning was stacked to the ceiling, so you could tell what demographic lives in. And folks are losing their minds over that. I'm like, wow.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
But yeah.
Hey,
I bet the raisins are gone too.
Oh yeah, the raisins and the meat are gone. Yes.
Yeah, the raisins and the meat.
There's lots of garlic, lots of paprika, lots of seasoned salt. And you can't even blame it on it being the cheap ones because there's lots of McCormick and house brands.
You know what? Let me tell you something. I know there are a lot of people out there watching this broadcast and saying, "Are these the kind of people that Nightwolf hang with?" Yeah. So anyway, thank you all so much for being on tonight. And the music on my show was written by that guy in that bottom right-hand corner, Vincent Hall.
Thank you. I'm honored. I'm grateful.
Leslie, you got anything to say before we sign off?
I just want everybody to keep yourself educated, open your mind, and read.
Yes.
Do your research. Know who you are and know where you come from. Don't let anybody identify you as something. Know who you are and stick to that.
Okay. I got one thing to say to all of our young brothers out there that are hanging on the corners and not making any sense of what they're doing. Put your gun down and read a book. You need to find out who you are. And when you find out who you are, you'll begin to understand that what you're doing is non-productive and it does not help your community. So put the damn gun down and pick up a book. Day before yesterday morning, here in District Heights, Maryland, a young woman was shot to death walking her baby 2 years old. And when the police showed up, the 2-year-old baby was on top of her crying. You know, and people say this is crazy. I think we should bring the death penalty back because some of these fools out here will not acknowledge what it really means to be human. So you don't want to be around human beings, you want to destroy human life, then we need to bring the death penalty back to the state of Maryland. That's just another thought.
And if I may, Jay, for the young people, remember this. You can't take everybody with you. Everything is not for everybody. It's good to know that you can be a part of everything in a relationship or any other part of life, but it's equally important to know that you do not have to be. That's it from me.
All right. Thank you all. Love you, Leslie.
Love you, Les.
Love you all too.
Love you, Les.
Right. Eat
And
well.
don't forget next week, Moi Ing. So
All right.
tune in next week, same time, same bat time, same bat channel.
We know what era you come from.
Okay. No, we're gonna have a conversation after the show.
I'm glad he
Good
didn't
night,
hum the mob
everybody.
scars theme.
Good night, everybody.
All right, and I will leave you with this one thought.
I saw it in reruns.
I'm telling on myself too.
Okay. That's good. That's enough.
Syndicated reruns. You know how they run them on the channels and the local channels because it's cheaper that way?
Oh man, you got me thinking about Mannix and everything.
All right. Time out. I have this to say. My grandfather, my mother's father, was a Cherokee with ancestry from Angola. And we would be down there as kids during the summertime, South Carolina. And I could remember him saying something to us when we were kids. It's not about the color of your skin or the color of your eyes. It's not about the texture of your hair or the clothes you wear. It's not about your traditions or your culture. And he would look at us with a straight face. And he said, do you all know what it's all about? And my cousin Junior would always say, no, Grandpa, what is it all about? He said, it's how you treat my heart. That's what it's all about. Human family, wake up. It's about how we treat each other's hearts, nothing else. And I'll say to you in Cherokee, Danada, Goai, Wado. Talk to you next week.